The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the AEE member webinar for today. My name is Sharon Hewson, and I am Executive Assistant here at AEE in Atlanta to Mr. Bill Kent, Executive Director. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started on the actual presentation today. As always, I'd just like to run through how this will go and what you can expect. You will receive a follow-up email in the next 24 to 48 hours that will contain a link to a certificate of attendance that you can use for credit towards your AEE certification renewals, and you will also receive a link to the recording of today's webinar. Please, as you go through the webinar today, as you're listening, if you have questions, please go ahead and type those in the questions panel on your control panel of GoToWebinar. They will all be addressed at the end of the webinar, so please be patient. We will get to those later in the webinar. And if you have follow-up questions after the webinar, you will receive Dr. Garcia's contact information in the follow-up email, and you'll be able to email him directly. So I would like to introduce to you today Dr. Jairo Garcia. And Dr. Garcia is with us from Urban Climate Nexus, where he is Chief Executive Officer. Dr. Garcia is an expert in sustainable urban development, carbon mitigation, and climate resiliency. He has a variety of experience, including performing spatial data analysis for ecological assessments and to identify climate vulnerabilities and risk analysis, greenhouse gas emissions inventories, designing monitoring and verification systems, crafting climate action plans and policies for mitigation and adaptation. Dr. Garcia is the former Director of Climate Policies and Renewables with the City of Atlanta and has held positions with the Earth Institute at Columbia University, ULCA, and he presently teaches classes at the Georgia Institute of Technology, better known as Georgia Tech, and Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Garcia holds an engineering degree, a Master's of Science in Management of Information Technologies from Syracuse University, and a Master of Science in Sustainability Management from Columbia University, and a doctoral degree in Educational Technology and Sustainability from the Pepperdine University. So thank you to all of you for being here today, and also thank you to Dr. Jairo Garcia, and I will pass control over to you now.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Again, my name is Dr. Jairo Garcia, and the topic of our webinar today is urban planning and transit technologies to cool cities in a warming planet. In this webinar, we'll be talking about the energy and carbon emissions in the transportation sector, the impact of congestion on public health and economy, land use and mobility in cities, sustainable transportation, and transportation technologies used by smart cities such as IoT, electric vehicles, and autonomous vehicles. According to the Energy Information Administration, in the United States, the transportation sector consumes more than 28.3 quadrillion BTUs of energy, which is considered the 37% of the total energy of the entire country. 92% of the energy in the transportation sector is generated from petroleum, 3% from natural gas, and 5% from renewables. As we observe in this graphic, the transportation sector in the United States consumes more energy than the industry sector or the residential and commercial sectors combined. The Energy Information Administration also indicated that the transportation sector generates more than 1,900 million metric tons of carbon dioxide per year, more than the industry, more than the residential, and more than the commercial sector. Since the year 2016, the transportation sector is emitting more carbon than the electric sector, generation sector. This is because utilities are transitioning from coal plants to gas plants that generate less carbon emissions. At the global level, however, the electricity and heat production sector is producing more carbon emissions than the transportation sector, with 49% of the total carbon emissions, while the transportation sector is around 20% of the total emissions. The most pressing economic, environmental, and social issue in cities in the United States and even around the world is congestion traffic. In Atlanta, for example, the worst nightmare is to be stuck in the interstate in traffic, going nowhere. The Atlanta Regional Commission, or ARC, regularly asks citizens in Atlanta about their biggest problem facing the metro area. Transportation has been for many years the most pressing issue in the metro Atlanta area. According to a study by the Texas A&M Transportation Institute, congestion in the United States exceeds $160 billion in productivity loss, which is around $960 per commute, or around 6.9 billion hours of extra time wasting, around 3.1 billion gallons of gasoline, and on average, each person in the United States loses 63 hours of extra time per year. The economic impact of vehicle crashes in the United States is enormous. According to a study by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, in 2010, $242 billion were lost in crashes. This is the equivalent of approximately $784 for every person living in the United States. The lifetime economic cost to society for each fatality is over $1.4 million. Over 90% of this amount is attributed to loss in workplace, household productivity, and legal cost. Each critically injured survivor costs an average of $1 million. In medical costs and loss of productivity account for 82% of the total cost. Loss in workplace productivity costs $57.6 billion, which represents 24% of the total cost. The transportation sector also produces many pollutants, including nitrogen oxide, particulate matters, lead ozone, and VOCs that produce respiratory diseases and many other public health effects. For cities, space is a very important issue, as this picture shows. At the top left corner, we see 200 people in 177 cars. The congestion is enormous. In the top right corner, we see the same 200 people in bikes. Although one of the lines where the bikes are is as long as we can see, the other lines are empty, optimizing the use of space in cities. If we take those 200 people and put it in buses, then it will take only 3 buses that occupy just 1 city block. If we take, as you see at the bottom right of the screen, right corner of the screen, if we take those 200 people and put it in 1 light rail train system, then we need only half a block to mobilize these people around the city. According to the United Nations, sustainable transportation is the provision of services and infrastructure for the mobility of people and goods by advancing economic and social development to benefit today's and future generations in a manner that is safe, affordable, accessible, efficient, and resilient, while minimizing carbon and other emissions and environmental impacts. According to the United Nations, there are 5 I's to achieve sustainable transportation, and those are infrastructure, innovation, integration, intelligence, and investment. The infrastructure component, cities are turning streets into a new concept called complete streets. A complete street is a transportation policy and design approach that requires streets to be planned, designed, operate, and maintained to enable safe, convenient, and comfortable travel and access for users of all age and abilities, regardless of their mode of transportation. That includes pedestrians, bikes, public transit, cars, and even scooters. Complete streets provide many benefits, including the improving of the quality of life of citizens, economic benefits, incentivize active living, and it's good for the environment. It is safe for everybody. This picture shows a complete street in Boston, Massachusetts. As we can see, this street allows the mobilization of pedestrians, bikers, buses, light railroads, and even cars. Innovation is the second component of sustainable transportation. The gondolas in Medellin, Colombia, reduce commuting time from poor neighborhoods that are located in the mountains surrounding the economic center of the city, while reducing congestion and greenhouse gas emissions and increasing economic development. This model is being replicated by other cities around the world. For this innovative transportation effort, the city of Medellin was named as the Innovative City of the Year in 2013 by the Citibank and the Wall Street Journal. The third component of sustainable transportation is integration. Integration means that the different ways of transportation must be linked and connected to allow users to connect practically seamless from one mode of transportation to another. For example, rail systems and buses that allow bikes are examples of this transit integration. The fourth component of sustainable transportation is intelligence. As we will discuss further, new technologies such as the Internet of Things and autonomous vehicles will allow transportation systems with the intelligence necessary to take autonomous decisions and be more effective in the use of resources in cities. A final component of sustainable transportation is investment. There are many mechanisms to finance transportation systems in cities. For example, in Atlanta, citizens vote to dedicate 1% of sales tax to finance public transit. Congestion charge is another mechanism, such as the one implemented in London, that consists of charging vehicles for driving at certain hours in the most congested areas of the city. This measure reduces the amount of vehicles driving inside the area of London, but also collect the resources to finance more sustainable and public transportation. In the United States, New York passed a congestion charge in 2019. Starting in 2021, New York City will charge vehicles entering pricey zones in the lower Manhattan. Another mechanism to finance public transportation is to implement a tax for gasoline vehicles. This regulation, which was challenged by some groups in California, was submitted for a popular vote in 2018. The majority of Californians voted to continue taxing gasoline to support public transportation. Another important approach that cities are taking to alleviate transportation issues is to optimize the spaces. Highways that at one time were considered a need for development have been detrimental to urban spaces and to their sustainable economic development. Roads going to nowhere and infrastructure focused on vehicles segregated communities and created social inequalities at many urban centers in the United States. As an example, Detroit, a city designed for cars, with little or no care to the needs of its people, went in bankruptcy. Nowadays, the renaissance of Detroit focused more on people instead of cars, making the city more livable and economically prosperous. Times Square is another example of how cities are reshaping their spaces. At one time, as you can see at the left of the screen, it was a zone of pollution, noise, and congestion. Times Square was revitalized by blocking traffic and allow pedestrians the opportunity to enjoy the area. That will create more, or create, in fact, more economic development for the area, while eliminating the congestion, the noise, and the pollution. In Atlanta, the city utilized an abandoned railroad to build a public space where people can enjoy and mobilize around the city. This 22 miles loop is called the Atlanta Beltline, which has created so far more than $2.1 billion in economic development for the city, and has been designed as one of the most successful urban developments in the world. Soon, the Beltline will be provided with a light railroad system that will allow citizens to mobilize around the city without the need of a car. Cities are also developing mixed-use areas close to public transit stations. This type of development is called transit-oriented development, or TOD. TOD are exciting, fast-growing trends in creating vibrant, livable, sustainable communities that are compact, walkable, pedestrian-oriented, mixed-use, centered around high-quality train systems that make possible to live a lower stress life without complete dependence on a car for mobility or survival. TODs provide many benefits, including reduction of dependency on driving, allow residents to live, work, and play in the same area, reduce the areas of carbon footprint or negative impact on the environment, provide access to better life services, stimulate the local economy, provide better access between urban and suburban areas, provide access to better entertainment or recreational services, provide access to better jobs, and revitalize urban areas, among others. This slide shows the TODs in progress in the city of Atlanta. Many cities around the world are developing TODs. Many cities around the world are also closing streets to cars to allow pedestrians to mobilize and to revitalize urban zones, like New York City did with Times Square. For example, Paris, Copenhagen, and Oxford are banning fossil fuel cars in certain areas of the city. This policy is revitalizing the city centers, is creating enormous economic development, and is improving the public health of their citizens. An alternative to reduce pollution, although no congestion, is the use of electric cars. Electric cars are becoming more efficient and they can be powered by renewable energy. According to a study by the Union of Concerned Scientists, electric cars are better for the environment and for the people than fossil fuel cars. This study breaks the myth that the benefits of EVs are related to the type of fuel in the production of electricity. According to the study, an electric vehicle is cleaner than even a hybrid, regardless of the type of energy that is fueling it. The sales of electric cars have been increasing exponentially because they are becoming more efficient and more affordable. In the diagram, it shows that just 430 cars were sold in the United States back in 2008. Nowadays, more than 50,000 per year are being sold in the United States. Charging stations for electric cars are becoming more common and more popular. This website that is shown in this slide is maintained by the Department of Energy to allow electric vehicle users find charging stations easily anywhere in the country using their mobile phones. Autonomous vehicles of self-driving cars are a revolutionary technology that will change the way they mobilize in cities. For example, there are proposals in the city of Atlanta to dedicate lines to autonomous vehicles. This allows that these autonomous vehicles won't interfere with our regular traffic, but also allows to mobilize quickly. Some discussions have been proposed in cities of partnership between the public and the private sector, where the private sector provides the vehicles, which are quite expensive, and the public sector provides the infrastructure to mobilize such vehicles. Companies that offer car sharing, such as Uber or Lyft or others, are thinking to deploy these autonomous vehicles and collaborate with cities that guarantee that these vehicles have a pathway to mobilize. That would be a combination between public infrastructure and the private sector with these amazing technologies that will reduce the amount of space utilized by single user drivers. For instance, in the city of Atlanta, we use more than 30% of our space dedicated for parking lots. The goal of this proposal is that people will subscribe to these autonomous vehicle services and they don't have to drive and they can be mobilized using reasonable prices around the city without the need of driving. Autonomous vehicles, it means to provide a better public transportation, more green spaces that are not dedicated to parking lots. Again, use less parking and use less congested as they optimize driving patterns and resources. Autonomous vehicles don't get distracted. Autonomous vehicles can report failures immediately to the owners, so they don't have any kind of mechanical issues in the interstates, and they provide many, many benefits for the near future. The car showing these slides was an autonomous vehicle that drove through the city of Atlanta without any problem in the year 2007. It's been more than 3 years that we test this vehicle that drove around the city of Atlanta without having any complication. And that was a proof that these vehicles, the technology is there, What we need is collaboration with the public sector to guarantee that they have a path to go. The same results were obtained with a couple of autonomous buses. They were tested through one of the most congested roads in the city of Atlanta, which is North Avenue in front of the Georgia Institute of Technology. The vehicle is provided with sensors that avoid collisions, and there's enough technology to mobilize the vehicle through the city without any complications. I would like to introduce to you the concept of smart cities. A smart city is an urban area that uses different types of electronics such as the Internet of Things, sensors, and others to collect data and then use insights gained from that data to manage assets, resources, and services in an effective way. Smart cities must address the core issues of urban living, such as environmental issues, safety issues, by using sensor-based to monitor everything from pollution to excessive use of water runoffs or structural conditions of bridges and roads. Smart cities improve urban mobility using real-time controls such as embedded sensors to cut downtimes and avoid bottlenecks, synchronization of streetlights, and eliminate bottlenecks across seamless network of integrated solutions from drivers, buses, or autonomous buses to people movers. Smart cities manage utilities using smart grids that boost efficiency in the use of energy and water. Smart cities improve building construction by including energy efficiency innovations from the beginning that save energy and reduce carbon emissions. A good example of a smart city is the city of Barcelona. Barcelona developed, for instance, applications in mobile devices that citizens can use to mobilize around the city that integrates bike-share systems with rapid transit and railroad systems and connect each other through the transportation infrastructure. Barcelona is also using Internet of Things in the trash cans to report in real time the status of these bins. For instance, indicating when they are full or empty, so they can synchronize where those trash needs to be collected. Barcelona is also using technology in campuses to provide that energy and innovation that provide many, many urban solutions to the city. The Eden Strategy Institute and the architecture firm ONG and ONG developed an independent ranking of the top 50 smart cities in the world. They select these 50s from 140 cities globally. The evaluation included many principles of sustainability, such as vision from the city, innovation, leadership, how the city is developing using people centricity, and many other rankings listed in this table. The top 10 cities from the ranking were London as a number 1, followed by Singapore, Seoul, New York, Helsinki, Montreal, Boston, Melbourne, Barcelona, and Shanghai. In conclusion, technologies such as the Internet of Things and electric or autonomous vehicles, along with the smart development and land use planning, will be the driving trends of smart cities in the near future. City design and repurposing ways in cities, along with technologies such as the Internet of Things, are fundamental tools to reduce traffic and make cities more sustainable. A smart city is a city that uses technology and is developed to oriented towards people instead of cars. I would like to conclude my presentation. If you want to read more about how we can integrate sustainable urban planning with technologies, I wrote a case for Atlanta in this book, Performing Measures in Local Sustainability Policy. I would like to open 4 questions. I would like to have plenty of time for questions and discussions that I'm pretty sure any of you might have.
Okay, we have our first question. It is, what is the plan or the best path to replace the energy used in our nation's transportation system to a transportation system run entirely on electricity?
Okay, I want to extend. Can you repeat the question one more time, please?
Sure. It is,
Hmm?
what is the plan or what is the best path to replace the energy used in our nation's transportation system to a system run entirely on electricity?
So my understanding is that we want to reduce the consumption of energy. We don't want to, the energy we are producing electricity. Our cars are going to start to run on electricity. We are seeing that trend that electric cars are, as we saw, this study showed that electric cars are more efficient. We have to remember that the definition of the economy is about the use of scarce resources, the use of scarce resources. Now, energy is a scarce resource. We don't want to produce more energy than we need. What we need to is reduce our consumption of energy in a smart way. So the response to that question is that we're going to use energy from other types of sources. But the idea, the goal is that we had to become very efficient in the use of energy from the economic perspective, from the public health perspective, and from the use of resources. We shouldn't be very efficient in the use of energy. The oil that we are consuming right now to feed our cars eventually is going to be replaced with new technologies. It could be solar, it could be wind, it could be nuclear, it could be other types of technology that doesn't produce the impacts that we saw in this presentation. So it's not about using one electricity and putting it in the other. It's about how we can produce cleaner energy in a more effective and efficient way. We had to become more efficient in our use of resources.
Okay, next it's, do you believe it with the advancement of electric vehicles will change urban planning approach?
Yes, so as I mentioned in my presentation, many cities, as a matter of fact, when I went to the Association of Energy Engineers conference in Washington, D.C., that I made this presentation, many of the people who attend to the presentation were people working for cities from Colorado, obviously California, but everywhere around the country. And all the cities are talking about how autonomous vehicles are going to change the way that we design cities. I mentioned that, for instance, we waste a lot of land that is a premium value in cities that most of the time are empty, and those are parking lots. Parking lots are only used during the period of time where the people are in the city. When people leave the city, those spots are empty. But even though they are empty, they are using resources. For example, if there is a parking deck, they are using electricity. They are using, for instance, when it rains, they have to clean those facilities. So just because there are parking and it's empty doesn't mean that the owners of those spaces don't have to pay for it. They had to pay taxes to use those spaces. And they are not producing, they are producing zero economic development. During the night, during the weekend, during the holidays, those spaces are not producing anything at all. So the idea the cities are thinking is if we limited the amount of parking spaces and we build more houses, hopefully more affordable houses so people can live in cities, then we can make those spaces more productive. We can produce more jobs. And at the same time, we reduce the biggest problem that cities are facing, which is congestion and traffic and pollution and stress and obesity that is causing so much harm to the American society, and especially around the world we are having this problem of just driving by just one person in one vehicle to work to the city. So there are many benefits that the cities are analyzing by the use of these autonomous vehicles. And then this also has a equity component. We know that our second largest purchase after buying a house is a car, and it's something that we have to keep paying for a long time. Once we finish to paying one car, then we have to switch the car and pay for the next one. So with autonomous vehicles, is provided as a new alternative where people who live in the cities don't require to have to pay a car, but to subscribe a service of the autonomous service that basically pick it up at any time and anywhere. And then we have to remember that most of the expenses that these companies incur nowadays is in drivers. Drivers, they earn by driving. Most of them, as probably you have the experience, some of them drive for many, many hours, which is a public risk. So by the use of this technology, autonomous vehicles, basically we don't have that issue. Now, as I mentioned, this solution fit by the private sector. Again, these cars are extremely expensive. So we need a collaboration between the public and the private sector, where the public sector provide the vehicles and the private sector provide the infrastructure in the benefit of the cities and the benefit of the environment and economic development. I want you to keep in mind always all the losses, all the billions of dollars on GDP they were losing by being stuck in traffic. Not only is it affecting our economy, but it's affecting our livelihoods, as these people, the people who are stuck in traffic, have more heart diseases and stress and obesity and all those sicknesses produced by the existing mobility. So.
Okay, our next question. If an area has an electric grid that still relies mostly on coal plants for power, does it still create a large impact to move electric vehicles?
That's a great question, and it's always that I mentioned. In the presentation I put the study, you guys are welcome to look at it, is by the concerned scientists. And they put this study which shows an electric vehicle that is fed with a pure coal plant and then analyze the entire cycle of the vehicle, from how the vehicle is created, how the vehicle mobilized, where the vehicle is going, and to the end of the product line. If you analyze the entire cycle of the electric vehicle and the benefits that it provides, because the electric vehicle provides many benefits, as I mentioned, it's reduced pollution, it's reduced stress because electric vehicles are more quieter, requires less maintenance. All those benefits together ended up that, according to that study, and it's something that many scientific communities already are accepting it, of course, is that electric vehicles are a better investment. It's better for the planet, it's better for our pockets, and it's better for even cities because we can reduce our pollutions. We can reduce many issues by people using electric vehicles. So yes, even if the car is absolutely full charged with coal, it's better for the environment than a regular fossil fuel vehicle.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Sorry, just give me a second here. What measures are being taken to address security concerns such as hacking of the IoT systems?
That's a wonderful question. It's one of the most pressing issues that cities are addressing when deploying Internet of Things and this type of technology. In one hand, we don't want to be supervised about all of movements. We don't want to have a big brother scenes when we cross the street, when we are located, how we mobilize. On the other hand, we have the hackers that they can break in the system, steal private information, and even affect, for instance, the grid or how the traffic lights are mobilizing. So those are issues that are extremely of concern of cities. I would be welcome to send you materials that address this issue of security. It definitely is a concern that cities are taking into consideration when moving to these technologies. But at the same time, at the other side of the coin, the benefits that we can achieve by using these type of technologies overcome these concerns. So even though we had to be cautious in the way that we move to these technologies, we cannot stop just because there are some risks. Any type of technology has risks. The point is we had to analyze, we had to be cautious how we move forward without stopping. So it is a concern, and then it's definitely that cities are addressing. And there are other concerns as well, like for instance, who is going to manage that amount of information that we are collecting from how people are crossing the streets, how people are walking, how many cars are driving, where the cars are driving, what are the traffic patterns. There are the very important privacy concerns, but at the same time, if we think about the benefits that we can create from that, we as a society, we might agree that the benefits overcome the concerns. One example, for instance, are security cameras. We do understand, we don't want to be, because we as Americans, we value our privacy. We don't want to be all the time supervised. But we know how useful are those cameras we see every day on TV, that is saving lives, is making places more secure, is making ways to arrest people that are making crimes. On the other side, we have to be sure that those technologies are not abused or get in the wrong hands. But it's something that we have to collectively figure out how we to do that, using the technology, using the smart people in this country to be sure that that is not abused, that it doesn't go in the wrong hands, or that data is not hacked, etc. Again, it's something that is extremely concerning for cities. However, most of the cities are moving in that direction because there are many benefits, including saving taxpayers' money in many issues, from the use of energy, use of water, use of public transportation, etc.
Okay. There are 276.1 million cars registered in the US. To replace these in 20 years requires the sales of over 12 million electric cars per year. Is it realistic to think that the consumer can afford to replace these vehicles over this time?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because I had to accept I don't have an electric car. I have a 1997 Toyota Corolla. So this car is, well, it's more than 20 years that I have this car. The reason I have this car is because I don't drive the car. I don't have the need to use that much the car. If I drive a car as a regular American, that drive outside the city, I might need to replace my car. I won't be able to drive my 1997 Toyota Corolla more than 50 miles per day. My car wouldn't stand that. So my next step would be to replace my car. The point they're trying to make is that most of the American people, replace the car in a regular basis. Nobody does what I do, which is keeping the car for 20 years. I know a few people, but they are just a few. Most of the people replace their car. We replace our cars in a regular basis. The point we're trying to make with cities is, in many, many cities, is that when people are going to replace the car, which most of us do it, the time of replacing the car, think about alternatives. And we have to be sure that we provide those alternatives. One of the biggest complaints of the people that use electric cars is, oh, where am I going to charge my car? The reason that question arises is because we have an infrastructure to produce, to feed those cars with gasoline. We have what are the gas stations. But what about if every single gas station in the country has a faster electric charger? So that is not anymore the excuse. So obviously we have to work with our citizens to be sure that the infrastructure is there so they have the convenience of recharging the cars everywhere. So it's totally realistic that we're gonna change our car system in that period of time. And it's not just the regular citizens. Let's talk about, for instance, cities or organizations, the police department, the fire department, all those organizations, they need to replace the fleets in a regular basis. They have to replace the fleets in a regular basis. Now they have the time that they have to determine what is the best investment for the city. What is the best way to take care of the taxpayers' money? The cars that the police drive are cars paid for us, the citizens. We pay for those cars. How the city guarantee that the investment, the trillions and trillions of dollars in investment of those cars are well spent? Now we have two choices. We can choose to, or cities, to buy cars that has to be fed all the time with gasoline, which is extremely expensive, plus the maintenance, oil change, and all the pieces that we need to replace an electric car, and I'm sorry, in a regular fossil fuel car, while the maintenance in an electric car is so minimal, and that doesn't require to be charged with gasoline. And if the electricity has a reasonable price, then we don't have to spend those trillions and trillions of dollars in gasoline that we are burning and is going to the atmosphere in the way of carbon emissions. So eventually, all those cities, as I mentioned in these conversations that we have in Washington with all those people from cities, are thinking seriously to replace the fleets with electric cars because they are better for the economy, they are better for the environment, and they are better for the people. So eventually, we're gonna migrate all amount of old cars, we're gonna migrate it to the new ones. It's the best for the planet, it's the best for the economy, and it's the best for the people solution. But that is happening. And we do that on a regular basis. We replace our cars.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What is your view on the use of industrial batteries, as many batteries are not environmentally friendly?
Yes, that's exactly, go back to the people that mentioned that question, is that we, in our regular cars, we use batteries. And probably there are some young people here that haven't heard this before. But if you look back in the 1970s, batteries were a problem, environmental problem for the United States. People used to dispose the batteries on the streets, in empty parking lots, everywhere. And the batteries are extremely poisonous. The batteries that we use in our regular fossil fuel cars have mercury in it. They are extremely poison batteries. They are extremely risky for the environment. They were horrible, but we were able to address that. We create the policies and the incentives to be sure that when you replace your batteries, that battery is disposed in the right way. So it goes back exactly with the same topic about electric cars. Electric cars use right now certain type of batteries that have some risk, no less than the batteries that we use in the regular cars. That is, even the old cars have worse issues with the environment and the risk than the batteries that we have right now. So we had to create the policy that the batteries are disposed in the right way or even recycled. So for instance, right now, we know that electric cars require very, very efficient batteries to mobilize, but houses don't require that kind of performance. So there are companies right now that taking the batteries for used electric vehicles and are using it in houses to accumulate solar energy and put it in those batteries and using as a regular, to feed lights, electric bulbs, or refrigerators, etc. And beyond that, we are improving in exponential way developing in batteries. So this is not going to stop there. Right now, we are developing more and more and more efficient batteries. So the battery is just an excuse because we have the problem even when we didn't have electric cars. We had the problem with batteries before electric cars were popular. So the issue is not about, the electric cars have a problem with the batteries. The issue is that we had to create the incentives and legislations that are good enough so we can reuse those batteries, and even develop more efficient batteries. So the problem of the batteries is as a matter of fact, an opportunity for research centers like the Georgia Institute of Technology, who is working in new ways to storage energy. So these are about opportunities. More opportunities we have to develop new technologies, the better future that we have. The problem that we had to eliminate is being stuck in the past and believe that business as usual is going to get us a better future. We have to, the past is the past. Those engines that used to use plusion and pistons and millions of pieces and pollute the air and make our children sick are part of the past, and we need to move forward with the new technologies.
Okay, thank you. We are getting close to the end of our time here, so I think I'm just going to give you one more question and then we will wrap up. So if we do not get to your question today, I do apologize. It's just a time issue, and feel free, please, to reach out to Dr. Garcia via his email address if you would like your question addressed. So final question for today is, can autonomous buses be implemented effectively in small urban centers?
As a matter of fact, I believe that is a perfect scenario to deploy autonomous buses because small towns don't have the huge problems that big cities have. That means many people, many cars, high prices of real estate, etc. So as I mentioned during my presentation, yes, there is a concern that these autonomous vehicles are going to have problem with how we function in cities. So one of the solutions that is being suggested, and is, as a matter of fact, is being deployed in some cities, is to dedicate lanes, like we dedicate paths, we have to dedicate paths for bikers. They have a dedicated path for autonomous vehicles, and so they cannot interfere with the regular traffic. These solutions can be easily implemented in the small towns. And I truly believe that is a perfect scenario that we can deploy this technology. We are doing that, not in small towns yet that I'm aware of, but we are doing it in campuses, which is basically small towns if you make a comparison. Campuses and universities are doing this technology. As an example, here in Georgia, one of the cities that has per capita the largest number of public transportation is Athens, Georgia, which is a college town. And Athens, Georgia, right now is debating the way how they can deploy autonomous buses. It is, again, it's a college town, meaning that it's a small town. Most of the people in this town mobilize using the public transportation offered by the city and by the university. So it's a perfect scenario to deploy this type of technology. So again, small towns are perfect to implement this type of solution.
Okay, thank you very much. So on that note, I'm going to just take control back over to show my screen. So thank you very much for your time and expertise today, Dr. Garcia. And once again, everybody, remember that you will receive a follow-up email in the next 24 to 48 hours with a link to your certificate of attendance to today's webinar, plus a link to the recording of today's webinar. And if you do have any follow-up questions, please reach out to Dr. Garcia directly, who is also going to share with me a copy of the presentation. So the file size is kind of large, just going to work with that. Once we get it down to an acceptable size, I will be able to share that with you if you request it. So thank you everyone for tuning in today. Just a couple of quick announcements from AEE. Don't forget that we do have multiple options for certification training. We have a lot of live training programs up and running and lots of online training options also. So please log in and see if there's anything that suits your needs. We have 4 events this year. We have East coming up in April. That's AEE Energy Conference and Expo, and we have our AEE West Energy Conference and Expo in June. We have our AEE World in Denver in September, and we have our first overseas event this year. We have AEE Europe taking place in Dublin, Ireland in October. So we hope to see some of you attending those events. And finally, our next webinar is actually 1 week today. We have Dr. Eric Woodruff, who will be explaining to you how you can understand and apply the special tax benefits that are related to energy efficiency, so you can make best use of that. So please join us again next week on Tuesday to hear that presentation from Dr. Eric Woodruff. So finally, thank you all once again for being here with us today, and thank you, Dr. Jairo Garcia, for your time and expertise today to present to our members. We truly appreciate that. So thank you, everyone, and I am going to close the webinar.